The soft glow of crystal chandeliers reflected off polished silverware as Jasmine Taylor adjusted her crisp black uniform in the staff bathroom mirror. She tucked a loose strand of hair back into her neat bun and took a deep breath. 6 months at the Crystal Room, and she still felt the butterflies before each shift. Not because she was unsure of her abilities, far from it, but because of what each shift represented, one step closer to her real dream. At 28, Jasmine wasn't like most of the other servers. With a master's degree in education sitting proudly framed in her tiny apartment, she found herself in an unexpected chapter of her life story. The teaching certification process was taking longer than she'd planned, and bills didn't pay themselves. "You ready for the lunch rush?" asked Tori, another waitress who was fixing her lipstick beside Jasmine. "I heard the Harrington woman booked a table for 8 today. Heaven help whoever gets that section." Jasmine smiled. "I'll take difficult customers over writing another essay on educational psychology any day." The kitchen was already buzzing when they stepped out. The head chef, Lewis, was barking orders while sous chefs moved like dancers around each other, flames rising from pans, and the rich smells of expensive food filling the air. "Table 12 needs more bread," called out the floor manager, Richard, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a stern mouth. He'd taken a chance on Jasmine despite her lack of fine dining experience. Perhaps he'd seen something in her college waitressing days that spoke of potential, or perhaps he'd just been desperate to fill the position. Either way, Jasmine had proven him right. The Crystal Room wasn't just any restaurant. Nestled in the wealthiest part of the city, it was where business deals were sealed, anniversaries celebrated, and social hierarchies displayed through who got the best tables. The clientele drove cars worth more than what Jasmine would make in years, and wore watches that could have paid off her student loans. "You've got the West section today," Richard said, handing Jasmine her tablet for taking orders. "Then lower, including the Harrington party." Jasmine nodded, unfazed. She dealt with all types here. The genuine ones who saw her as a person, the distracted ones too busy with their phones to even look up, and yes, the ones who looked at her dark skin and made assumptions about her intelligence, her background, her worth. "I've got this," she said with quiet confidence. As she arranged water glasses and checked that each table setting was perfect, Jasmine thought about her third graders from her student teaching days. She missed their curious faces, their endless questions, the moment when understanding dawned in their eyes. Soon, she told herself, soon she'd be Miss Taylor with her own classroom. The first few tables of her shift were easy. A pair of elderly women celebrating a birthday, a quiet businessman with a newspaper, a young couple clearly stretching their budget for a special occasion. Jasmine moved between them with practiced ease, remembering preferences, suggesting wines, being present without being intrusive. Then the front doors opened, and even without looking, Jasmine felt the shift in the room's energy. Elena Harrington had arrived with her entourage, all designer clothes and loud laughter. From across the room, Jasmine observed the hostess leading them to the large round table in her section. Elena was exactly as described, mid-50s, blonde hair styled expensively, jewelry that caught the light with every gesture. She walked like someone who expected the floor itself to be grateful for carrying her weight. Her friends followed in her wake, similar in appearance but somehow less substantial, as if Eleanor's personality was so big it made others fade in comparison. Jasmine gave them a moment to settle, watching as Eleanor complained about the table location, despite it being the one she'd specifically requested. With a final check of her appearance and a straightening of her shoulders, Jasmine approached the table with menus and her warmest professional smile. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Crystal Room. My name is Jasmine, and I'll be taking care of you today." Her voice was clear and pleasant, betraying none of the wariness she felt as Eleanor's eyes flicked over her with immediate dismissal. For a split second, Jasmine caught the slight curl of Eleanor's lip, the whispered comment behind a manicured hand, the suppressed snickers from several at the table. She'd seen that look before. But unlike those other times, today would turn out very differently. For everyone involved, Jasmine placed menus in front of each person at Eleanor's table, careful not to brush against their designer-clad shoulders. As she handed Eleanor hers, the woman didn't even look up, her diamond-encrusted fingers tapping impatiently on the white tablecloth. Would you like to hear about our specials today? Jasmine asked, maintaining her warm professional tone. Eleanor finally raised her eyes, looking at Jasmine as if she'd just noticed a fly in her soup. I suppose, she sighed dramatically, if you must. Jasmine smoothly described the chef's creations for the day, her knowledge of ingredients and preparation techniques evident in her detailed descriptions. One of the men at the table seemed impressed, nodding along as she spoke about the seared scallops with saffron risotto. And our wine pairing suggestion for the lamb is a wonderful Bordeaux fat. That's quite enough, Eleanor cut her off with a dismissive wave. I know more about wine than you ever could, dear. She turned to her companions. Can you believe they just let anyone work here these days? The standards have clearly slipped. The woman to Eleanor's right, dressed in a pale pink suit with pearls the size of marbles, tittered behind her hand. Remember when Pierre was the maitre d'? He'd never have allowed it. Jasmine pretended not to hear, years of practice keeping her smile firmly in place. I'll give you a few minutes with the menus then. Would anyone like a cocktail while you decide? She took their drink orders, noticing how Eleanor deliberately mispronounced simple cocktail names while staring at her, as if daring Jasmine to correct her. The others in the party seemed split, a few looking uncomfortable at Eleanor's behavior, others silently encouraging it with smirks and side glances. As Jasmine walked toward the bar, she felt Eleanor's eyes boring into her back. The bartender, Dean, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and quick hands, noticed her expression. Harrington table? He asked quietly while preparing a martini. Jasmine nodded. The very same. Don't let her get to you. That woman's sent 3 servers home crying in the past year. Not today, Jasmine said firmly, arranging the drink order on her tray. I'd face tougher audiences. Try explaining fractions to 33rd graders after they've had chocolate cake at lunch. Deanne laughed. You're made of stronger stuff than most, Jasmine. When she returned with the drinks, Eleanor was mid-story, her voice intentionally loud. So I told the driver, if you can't find your way around this city after 10 years, perhaps you should consider a different profession. These people just don't understand the value of competence. She paused as Jasmine approached, a sly smile spreading across her face. Speaking of which, Jasmine carefully placed each drink in front of its owner. The gin and tonic with lime for you, sir. The Manhattan, straight up. The Cosmopolitan for the lady in blue. And your martini, Mrs. Harrington, extra dry with 3 olives, as requested. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, perhaps disappointed that Jasmine hadn't made a mistake she could pounce on. She took a deliberate sip, then frowned. This is too dry. I apologize, ma'am. I specifically asked for extra dry, as you ordered. Well, now I want it less dry, and these olives taste cheap. We use imported Castelvetrano olives, ma'am, but I'd be happy to bring you a different martini. Eleanor's friend in the cream-colored blazer leaned forward. Eleanor always knows her olives. Her husband owns that lovely Italian import business. How fascinating, Jasmine replied politely, though she knew perfectly well that Eleanor's husband had actually lost that business in a messy divorce settlement 3 years ago. The restaurant gossip network was more efficient than any social media. One man at the table, younger than the rest with kinder eyes, looked up at Jasmine apologetically. Don't trouble yourself. I'm sure the martini is perfect. Eleanor shot him a glare that could have frozen the sun. Philip, do let me handle this. I'm sure our waitress is doing her best. The pause before best stretched intentionally long. As Jasmine collected the martini, Eleanor's hand suddenly jerked forward, accidentally knocking her water glass. Ice-cold water splashed across the table and onto Jasmine's uniform skirt. Several of the party gasped. Oh my, Eleanor said, not bothering to disguise her satisfaction. How clumsy of you to bump my arm like that. Jasmine felt the cold water seeping through the fabric, but her expression remained neutral. No problem at all, ma'am. Accidents happen. I'll clean this up right away and bring you a fresh glass of water along with your new martini. Eleanor's smile faltered slightly, clearly disappointed by Jasmine's composure. As Jasmine walked away to fetch towels, she heard Eleanor stage whisper to her companions. They really should train their help better. But what can you expect from, well, you know. The table fell awkwardly silent, a few uncomfortable glances exchanged. The battle lines were being drawn, and everyone in the crystal room was beginning to notice. Jasmine returned to Eleanor's table with fresh towels, a new water glass, and the remade martini. She quickly cleaned up the spill, her movements efficient and graceful. The other tables in her section were watching now, curious about the commotion. "Your new martini, Mrs. Harrington," Jasmine said, placing it carefully on the table. "Less dry, as requested, with fresh olives." Eleanor barely glanced at the drink. "We're ready to order now. I don't want to waste any more time." Her voice carried the unmistakable edge of someone used to being obeyed instantly. Jasmine took out her small notepad. "Of course, what would you like?" One by one, the guests ordered, complicated requests with substitutions and special instructions. Jasmine wrote everything down precisely, repeating the orders back perfectly. When she got to Eleanor, the woman studied the menu as if it were written in a foreign language. "I want the salmon, but not like it says here. I want it poached, not grilled, with the sauce on the side. No capers, extra dill. And I want wild rice instead of that quinoa nonsense, but the rice needs to be cooked in vegetable broth, not chicken. Is that too complicated for you to remember?" "Not at all, Mrs. Harrington. Poached salmon, sauce on the side, no capers, extra dill, with wild rice cooked in vegetable broth." Jasmine's memory had served her well through graduate school exams and would not fail her now. Eleanor frowned, visibly annoyed that she couldn't trip Jasmine up. "And make sure it's not overcooked. I can't stand dry fish. The chef prepares all our salmon medium unless otherwise specified." "I didn't ask for a cooking lesson," Eleanor snapped. "Just tell him not to ruin it." Jasmine nodded politely, finished taking the orders, and headed to the kitchen. Behind her, she could hear Eleanor loudly complaining about everything from the restaurant's temperature to the spacing of the tables. In the kitchen, Louis, the chef, groaned when he saw Eleanor's order. "That woman again? Last time she sent back the steak 3 times. "I know," Jasmine said, "but we've got this. Just make it perfect, and maybe she'll actually eat it." Louis shook his head. "For you, Jasmine, I'll try. But that woman could find fault with God's own cooking." 20 minutes later, as Jasmine was serving another table, she noticed Richard, the manager, walking quickly toward Eleanor's table. Her heart sank. Eleanor was standing, her face flushed with manufactured outrage, pointing at the bread basket. "This bread is stale. And look at these water spots on my glass. This is completely unacceptable." The bread had been baked fresh that morning, and the glasses were polished to a sparkle, as they always were at the crystal room. Eleanor was creating problems where none existed. Jasmine hurried over, arriving at the same time as Richard. "Mrs. Harrington," Richard began smoothly, "is there a problem?" "This entire experience has been dreadful," Eleanor declared loudly. "The service is slow, the bread is stale, and that waitress," she jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, "has been giving me attitude since we arrived." Several nearby diners were watching now, some with embarrassment, others with interest. Philip, the younger man at Eleanor's table, looked mortified. "I can assure you the bread is fresh," Richard said. "We bake it throughout the day." "Are you calling me a liar?" Eleanor's voice rose even higher. Richard maintained his professional calm. "Not at all. I'd be happy to bring you a different variety if you prefer." "It's not just the bread. Everything is wrong. The wine is too warm, the water is too cold, and—" At that moment, the food arrived. Jasmine and another server placed the beautifully arranged plates in front of each guest. When Eleanor's salmon was set before her, she barely glanced at it before declaring, "This looks overcooked." "Would you like to try it first, ma'am?" Jasmine suggested gently. "Chef Louis prepared it specially according to your instructions." Eleanor picked up her fork and cut into the salmon with unnecessary force. The fish flaked perfectly, revealing the moist, tender center. She frowned, clearly disappointed that it was cooked exactly right. "Well, it's not ineatable, I suppose," she muttered, then looked up at Richard. "But I still think your standards have fallen terribly. When my husband was on the city council, restaurants in this district knew how to treat important customers." Richard nodded diplomatically. "We aim to treat all our customers with respect and excellent service, Mrs. Harrington. Please enjoy your meal." As Richard walked away, Eleanor turned her cold gaze to Jasmine. "You can go now. We don't need you hovering." Jasmine nodded professionally. I'll check back shortly to see if you need anything else. As she walked away, she could feel the tension building. Elena was looking for a fight, and nothing Jasmine did would satisfy her. The real question was not if, but when, the situation would explode. The main course was coming to an end. Jasmine had checked on Eleanor's table twice, once to refill water glasses and again to ask if everything was satisfactory. Each time, Eleanor had given her a cold stare and a curt, "It's fine," though her tone suggested otherwise. Other tables in Jasmine's section were having a wonderful time. An older couple celebrating their anniversary thanked her warmly for her attentive service. A group of business people laughed as she recommended desserts. Jasmine moved between tables with ease, but she could feel Eleanor's eyes following her, searching for any mistake. As Jasmine approached Eleanor's table to clear the main course plates, she noticed most had been wiped clean. A silent compliment to the chef despite Eleanor's complaints. "How is everything?" Jasmine asked, maintaining her professional tone. The woman in the cream blazer smiled slightly. "It was delicious, thank you." Eleanor shot her friend a sharp look. "It was passable at best." The stammen was bland. "I'm sorry to hear that," Jasmine replied. "Would you like to see our dessert menu?" Before Eleanor could respond, her red wine glass tipped over. The dark liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a blooming flower, some of it splashing onto Eleanor's expensive cream-colored skirt. "You clumsy girl!" Eleanor shouted, jumping up from her chair. "Look what you've done." The thing was, Jasmine hadn't touched the glass. She had been standing a good 2 feet away when it fell. Eleanor had knocked it over herself, deliberately, and was now creating a scene. "I'm very sorry about the spill, ma'am," Jasmine said calmly, "but I wasn't near your glass." The restaurant fell quiet as heads turned toward the commotion. Eleanor's face grew red with manufactured outrage. "Are you calling me a liar?" she demanded, her voice carrying throughout the dining room. "I saw you bump the table. You ruined my Chanel skirt." She held up the stained fabric as evidence. "This cost more than you probably make in a month." Philip, the younger man at the table, spoke up. "Eleanor, she didn't touch the glass. I was watching." "Stay out of this, Philip." Eleanor snapped before turning back to Jasmine. "I want to speak to your manager immediately." Richard was already making his way over, his face concerned but composed. He'd been watching the situation unfold from across the room. "What seems to be the problem, Mrs. Harrington?" he asked. Eleanor pointed an accusing finger at Jasmine. This server knocked over my wine on purpose. Look at my skirt. It's ruined." Richard looked to Jasmine, who maintained her professional demeanor despite the unfair accusation. "I was clearing plates from the other side of the table, sir. I didn't touch Mrs. Harrington's glass." Several diners at nearby tables nodded in agreement, having witnessed the entire scene. Eleanor, realizing she was losing ground, decided to escalate. She stood straighter, raising her voice to ensure everyone in the restaurant could hear. "I don't know why an establishment like this would hire someone so obviously unqualified," she announced, looking Jasmine up and down with open contempt. "I'm sure there are plenty of other jobs more suitable for your kind." The words hung in the air like poison. The racial undertone was unmistakable. A collective intake of breath sounded throughout the dining room. An elderly woman at a nearby table put her hand to her mouth in shock. A young couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. Richard's expression hardened. "Mrs. Harrington, I must ask you to—" "No, Richard, it's okay," Jasmine interrupted quietly. Then, straightening her shoulders, she looked directly at Eleanor. The restaurant was completely silent now. Eleanor stood with a triumphant smirk, clearly believing she had won, that Jasmine would either break down in tears or lash out in anger, either reaction giving Eleanor the satisfaction of feeling superior. Eleanor's friends at the table had various reactions. 2 looked embarrassed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. 1 seemed quietly pleased by the drama. Philip looked deeply uncomfortable, his face flushed with second-hand shame. The woman in the cream blazer was slowly gathering her purse, as if preparing to leave. "Well," Eleanor prompted when Jasmine didn't immediately respond. "Don't you have anything to say for yourself? Or should I speak to the owner about the kind of people they're hiring these days?" Jasmine took a deep breath. Her mind flashed to her parents who had worked double shifts to put her through college, to her professor who had encouraged her to pursue her master's degree, to the children she hoped to teach someday. Their faces gave her strength as she prepared to respond to Eleanor's public attempt at humiliation. The entire restaurant waited, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The silence in the crystal room was complete. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died. All eyes were on Jasmine as she stood tall in her wine-splattered uniform, facing Eleanor's smug expression. Jasmine could feel her heart pounding. Years of hiding her feelings, of smiling through disrespect, of keeping quiet to keep her job, all of it bubbled just below the surface. She thought about walking away. She thought about shouting. She did neither. Instead, she took a slow, deep breath and spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried throughout the hushed restaurant. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset about your skirt. I'd be happy to get you some club soda for the stain," she began, her tone measured and professional. "What you may not understand is that I hold a master's degree in education." Eleanor blinked, clearly not expecting this response. A small crease appeared between her perfectly plucked eyebrows. "I'm working here while completing my teaching certification," Jasmine continued. "I serve you and everyone else with the same respect I'll show my future students, regardless of their background or behavior." Someone at a corner table whispered, "Good for her." The woman in the cream blazer at Eleanor's table looked up with new interest. Jasmine maintained steady eye contact with Eleanor. "Now, would you like me to bring you another glass of the cabernet, or would you prefer to see our dessert menu?" The simple question at the end, so normal, so professional, highlighted the absurdity of Eleanor's outburst. A few diners nodded in approval. One person started to clap, but quickly stopped when Richard shot them a look. Eleanor's face flushed deeper, but now with embarrassment rather than rage. She had expected tears or anger, something she could use to further paint Jasmine as unprofessional. Instead, she was facing dignity and poise. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Eleanor sputtered, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "I'll have you know I sit on the board of 3 major charities and—" "4, actually," interrupted the woman in the cream blazer, rising from her seat. "And I believe that will be changing shortly, Eleanor." She turned to Jasmine with a respectful nod. "I'm Vivian Chen, chairperson of the West Side Educational Foundation. We fund scholarships for promising teachers." She pulled out a business card and handed it to Jasmine. "I'd love to speak with you about your career goals. My foundation is always looking for educated, composed individuals who handle difficult situations with grace." Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "Vivian, you can't possibly." "I think I've seen enough," Vivian said firmly. She placed money on the table for her meal. "Eleanor, we've been friends for 15 years, but I won't sit by while you treat people this way." She nodded to Jasmine again. "I look forward to our conversation." As Vivian walked out, Philip stood up too. "I should go as well. Mrs. Taylor, your service was impeccable. The issue was never with you." He placed a generous tip beside his plate and left. 2 more of Eleanor's party shifted uncomfortably, then mumbled excuses and departed, leaving Eleanor with just 2 remaining friends who looked like they wished they were anywhere else. Richard stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrington, I need to speak with you privately." Eleanor found her voice again. "There's nothing to discuss. I've been coming here for years, and this is how you treat your best customers? By humiliating them in front of everyone?" An elderly gentleman at a nearby table spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of his years. "Young lady, the only person causing humiliation here is you. To yourself." A few people nodded in agreement. Someone else murmured, "Shameful behavior." Eleanor looked around, suddenly realizing she had lost the room. The narrative she had tried to create, of being the wronged party, had crumbled in the face of Jasmine's dignified response. Richard's voice was low but firm. "Mrs. Harrington, if you can't treat our staff with respect, I'll have to ask you to leave." "Leave? Do you know how much money my friends and I spend here?" Eleanor hissed, grabbing her designer purse. "Not enough to buy the right to disrespect my team," Richard replied steadily. Eleanor stood frozen for a moment, her eyes darting around the room as if seeking an ally. Finding none, she gathered her things, her hands shaking slightly. "This place has gone downhill anyway," she declared to no one in particular as she stormed toward the exit, her two remaining friends trailing behind like deflated balloons. As the door closed behind Eleanor, the restaurant remained quiet for a beat longer. Then, like a wave, applause began to spread through the crystal room, gentle at first, then growing stronger. All of it directed at Jasmine, who stood surprised and moved by the show of support. The applause eventually died down, and the crystal room slowly returned to normal. Waiters moved between tables, wine glasses clinked, and the gentle hum of conversation resumed. But something had changed. Jasmine felt it as she continued her shift, noticing the respectful nods and kind smiles from diners who had witnessed the confrontation. Richard pulled her aside near the kitchen entrance. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. "I should have stepped in sooner." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm fine, really, and you gave me the space to handle it myself. I appreciate that." "You did so with more grace than most would have managed," Richard said. "Take a quick break if you need it." "I'd rather keep working," Jasmine replied with a small smile. "Standing still just gives me time to replay it all in my head." As she continued her shift, Jasmine noticed a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s sitting alone at a corner table. The woman had been there when everything happened, quietly observing. When Jasmine approached to refill her water, the woman looked up with kind eyes. "I couldn't help but overhear earlier," she said. "You mentioned you're getting your teaching certification." Jasmine nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm in my final semester." "I'm Dr. Helen Washington," the woman said. "I'm the superintendent of Oakwood School District." Jasmine nearly dropped her water pitcher. Oakwood was one of the most prestigious districts in the area, known for their innovative teaching methods and excellent resources. Dr. Washington handed Jasmine a business card. "We're always looking for teachers who can remain composed under pressure and treat everyone with dignity, even those who don't deserve it. Call my office when you're certified." "I'd like to meet formally." Thank you," Jasmine managed, slipping the card into her pocket with slightly trembling hands. By the end of her shift, Jasmine had collected 4 business cards and countless words of support. Diane, the bartender, mixed her a non-alcoholic celebration drink as she counted her tips, significantly higher than usual. "To stand in your ground," he said, raising his glass of water in a toast. Louis emerged from the kitchen, his chef's coat splattered with the day's cooking. "I heard what happened. That woman has been making my staff miserable for years. About time someone stood up to her." Tori, who had helped cover Jasmine's other tables during the commotion, nudged her shoulder. "You're all over social media, you know. Someone recorded part of it." Jasmine's heart sank. "They did what?" Tori showed her phone. A video was already circulating, showing the moment Jasmine had spoken about her education and responded with composure. The caption read, "Watch this waitress respond perfectly to racist customer." "Great," Jasmine sighed. "Just what I need to go viral while I'm applying for teaching jobs." "Are you kidding?" Richard said, joining the group. "This makes you look amazing. Professional under pressure, educated, dignified. I've already had 3 customers ask if you'll be working tomorrow because they want to come back and request your section." Jasmine shook her head in disbelief. What had started as a normal Tuesday shift had somehow turned into a pivotal moment in her life. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Vivian Chen, the woman who had walked out on Eleanor, returned to the restaurant. She was dressed in an elegant pantsuit that spoke of both wealth and taste, but her expression was warm. "I was hoping to catch you before you left," Vivian said. "I meant what I said earlier about the West Side Educational Foundation. We offer scholarships to promising educators, particularly those from backgrounds underrepresented in the teaching profession." "I appreciate that," Jasmine said carefully. "But I don't want charity because someone was rude to me." Vivian smiled. "This isn't charity, it's investment. What I saw today was a natural educator, someone who can teach through example, who maintains dignity under pressure, who chooses wisdom over anger. Our foundation would be lucky to support your career." As they sat down to talk further, Jasmine noticed a text message from her mother on her phone. "How was work today, sweetheart?" Jasmine smiled. Where would she even begin? "Eventful," she typed back. "I'll tell you everything when I get home." Outside the restaurant windows, The city lights were coming on as evening fell. Jasmine looked at Vivian, at the business cards in her hand, at the supportive staff around her. Sometimes standing your ground changed everything, not just a moment, but a future. 3 weeks passed since the incident at the Crystal Room. Autumn leaves crunched under Jasmine's feet as she walked through the park, sipping coffee and enjoying her rare day off. The video of her encounter with Eleanor had indeed gone viral, reaching over 2 million views. Local news had picked up the story, running a segment about dignity in the face of discrimination. Jasmine had declined most interview requests, preferring to focus on finishing her teaching certification. But her life had undeniably changed. The Crystal Room's owner had offered her a promotion to floor manager with a substantial raise. She politely declined, explaining that teaching remained her true passion. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vivian Chen. "Great news. Board approved the scholarship fund. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss details?" Jasmine smiled as she typed her reply. The Westside Educational Foundation had created a new scholarship program for aspiring teachers from diverse backgrounds, naming Jasmine as the first recipient. The funds would cover her remaining certification costs and provide a living stipend during her student teaching semester. As she continued her walk, Jasmine noticed a familiar face on a bench ahead. Philip, the kind man from Eleanor's table who had left a generous tip and spoken up for her. He was feeding pigeons, looking thoughtful. "Excuse me," she said as she approached. "Philip, right, from the Crystal Room?" He looked up, surprised, then smiled in recognition. "Ms. Taylor. What a pleasant surprise. Please, join me if you'd like." Jasmine sat down, leaving comfortable space between them. "I wanted to thank you properly for speaking up that day." Philip shook his head. "I should have said more sooner. Eleanor is my wife's aunt. I've watched her treat service workers poorly for years, always biting my tongue to keep family peace." "Family dynamics are complicated," Jasmine acknowledged. "Still, there's a line," Philip said. "Your response that day, it changed things for a lot of people, not just Eleanor." He explained that the incident had sparked serious conversations within their social circle. 2 charity boards had indeed asked Eleanor to step down. The country club had issued her a formal warning about member conduct. "And how is she taking all that?" Jasmine asked, genuinely curious rather than vindictive. Philip gazed at the pigeons gathering around the bench. Not well at first, lots of blame, victim mentality. But something shifted last week. "I think the social consequences finally sank in." He hesitated before continuing. "She's asked to meet with you, actually. To apologize." Jasmine raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Really?" "I was skeptical too," Philip admitted. "But I think she's genuine. The video going viral forced her to see herself through others' eyes for the first time." Jasmine considered this. "I'll think about it." They chatted a while longer before parting ways. As Jasmine walked home, her mind turned over the possibility of meeting Eleanor again. Would it be closure or just another uncomfortable encounter? 2 days later, in a quiet corner of a small cafe, neutral ground, Jasmine sat across from Eleanor Harrington. Gone was the haughty expression and designer outfit. Eleanor looked smaller somehow, dressed simply, her eyes unable to meet Jasmine's fully. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Eleanor began, her voice lacking its former sharp edge. "I was curious," Jasmine replied honestly. Eleanor fiddled with her napkin. "I spent my life believing certain things, about status, about who deserves respect." She paused. "I was wrong. My behavior was inexcusable." Jasmine listened, sensing the struggle behind Eleanor's words. "The truth is," Eleanor continued, "watching that video was like seeing a stranger. A horrible, entitled woman I didn't recognize." Her voice cracked slightly. "But it was me." "Recognition is an important first step," Jasmine said carefully. Eleanor nodded. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About my behavior, about the assumptions I make." She looked up, finally meeting Jasmine's eyes. "I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be better." Then Eleanor did something unexpected. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I heard about your teaching aspirations. I want to help." Inside was documentation for a new scholarship fund at the local community college, specifically for service workers pursuing education degrees. Elena had endowed it with a substantial initial donation. It's called the Dignity Scholarship, Eleanor explained, because you showed me what true dignity looks like. Jasmine was speechless for a moment. This is significant.